I didn't know a single sentence could make a room feel smaller. We were gathered in his parents' living room, the kind that always smelled faintly of cardamom tea and furniture polish. Family photos lined the walls, his grandparents, his cousins, childhood birthdays, all carrying the same last name like a badge of pride. I'd seen those frames 100 times, but that night, they felt like witnesses. I sat beside my husband, Samir, my hands folded neatly in my lap. I had learned early in our marriage how to sit quietly, how to smile at the right moments, how to make myself smaller when conversations weren't meant for me. It was supposed to be a simple dinner. Just family. Just food. Just noise and laughter. I was wrong. Samir cleared his throat, the way he did when he wanted attention but didn't want to ask for it. His mother paused mid-sentence. His uncle looked up from his phone. Even the clinking of spoons slowed. "I've been meaning to say something," Samir said, leaning back slightly, his voice calm, casual, almost proud. I turned toward him, confused. "This is actually a good time," he continued. "Since everyone's here." Something tightened in my chest. He smiled, not at me but at the room. "I've decided I'm taking back my old last name," he announced. "I don't think it makes sense to keep using hers." A beat of silence passed. Then another. I felt my breath stall halfway in. Someone chuckled awkwardly, assuming it was a joke. Samir didn't smile. "My professional image matters," he added lightly. And, honestly, he glanced at me then, not warmly, not apologetically, just briefly. "Her last name is embarrassing. It doesn't fit." The word hit me harder than I expected. Embarrassing. It echoed in my ears like a slap that no one else reacted to. I didn't move. Didn't speak. Didn't even blink. Every face in the room turned toward me. His mother's eyes flickered with surprise, then something else. Curiosity, maybe judgment. His sister raised an eyebrow. His uncle coughed. I felt exposed, stripped down to something shameful without ever being asked. Samir went on, unaware or unconcerned, with the damage he'd just caused. "It's not personal," he said, waving a hand slightly. "It's just practicality. Some names carry weight. Some don't. Some don't." I swallowed. When we got married, he had said he liked my last name. Said it sounded strong. Said it suited me. I remembered the way he'd written it beside his own on a scrap of paper, testing how it looked together. I remembered thinking it meant something. Now he dismissed it like an outdated accessory. I forced myself to breathe. The room shifted, discomfort thickening the air. His mother finally spoke. "Well, as long as you're happy," she said slowly. "Happy?" Samir nodded. "Exactly." No one asked me how I felt. No one checked my face. No one noticed the way my hands had clenched into fists. Because in that moment, my feelings didn't seem relevant. I stared at the tablecloth, tracing the tiny floral pattern with my eyes, grounding myself so I wouldn't fall apart. I told myself not to react. Not here. Not now. Not in front of them. But something inside me had already cracked. This wasn't just about a name. It was about how easily he had discarded a piece of me, how comfortable he was doing it publicly, how little he expected me to object. And what hurt the most? I hadn't seen it coming. I had trusted him. I had believed in us. I had thought respect was a given. That night, sitting among his family, I realized something painful. I wasn't his partner in that room. I was an inconvenience he needed to correct. And as the conversation slowly resumed around me, I felt myself retreat inward, holding onto a single, terrifying question. If my name embarrassed him, what else about me did he regret? The drive home was quiet. Not the peaceful kind of quiet, the kind that wraps around you like a heavy blanket you can't breathe under. Samir kept one hand on the steering wheel, the other tapping lightly against the door. He hummed the radio as if nothing significant had happened, as if he hadn't just reduced a piece of my identity to something shameful in front of his entire family. I stared out the window, watching streetlights blur past, each one reflecting briefly in the glass before disappearing. I wondered which hurt more, what he said, or how easily he'd said it. At a red light, he glanced at me. "You're quiet." I didn't respond. He sighed. "Look, don't overthink it. You know how my family is. Traditional. Appearances matter. So does respect, I said quietly. He frowned. I wasn't disrespecting you. I turned toward him then. You called my name embarrassing. He shrugged slightly. I said it didn't fit professionally. There's a difference. I let out a small, humorless laugh. Not to me. The light turned green. He drove on. You're taking it too personally, he said after a moment. This isn't about you. That sentence lodged itself somewhere deep inside me. This isn't about you. I pressed my lips together, fighting the urge to cry. I wasn't going to give him that satisfaction. Not tonight. When we reached home, he went straight to the bedroom, loosening his tie, scrolling through his phone. I stayed in the kitchen, leaning against the counter, trying to steady myself. My reflection in the dark window looked unfamiliar, smaller, quieter. I thought back to our early days. The way he used to introduce me proudly. The way he used my full name with a smile. The way he said we were equals. Somewhere along the way, that equality had turned into convenience. That night, I lay awake while he slept beside me, his breathing steady and unbothered. I stared at the ceiling, replaying the moment again and again. The pause in the room, the stares, the word embarrassing hanging in the air. I thought about my parents, my grandparents, the history carried in my name. It wasn't fancy. It wasn't powerful, but it was mine. And he had treated it like a liability. The next morning, I made breakfast out of habit. Samir scanned his emails while sipping his tea. I've already booked an appointment with a lawyer, he said casually. Name change paperwork shouldn't take long. I froze. You already decided? I asked. He looked up, surprised. Of course. Why wouldn't I? You didn't think to talk to me first? He shrugged again. It's my name. The word stung more than the announcement itself. My name. Not our decision. Not our marriage. Just his. I nodded slowly. Do whatever you want. He smiled, relieved. I knew you'd understand. But I didn't. What I understood was this. He didn't see my feelings as something that needed consideration. He didn't see my name as part of our union. He didn't see me as someone whose opinion carried weight. Later that day, while folding laundry, I found our wedding invitation tucked into a drawer. Our names printed side by side. Equal in size. Equal in placement. I traced the letters of my last name with my finger. This was more than pride. It was about dignity. And as I folded the paper carefully and placed it back, a quiet resolve began forming inside me. Not anger, not revenge. Clarity. Because something had shifted. I realized I couldn't keep shrinking myself to fit into a life where I was expected to be grateful for being tolerated. And that realization was the beginning of something he hadn't anticipated. I didn't argue with him after that. Not because I agreed, but because something inside me had gone very still. The kind of stillness that comes right before a storm, calm, deliberate, unsettling. Samir went about his days as usual. He left early for work, came home late, and talked endlessly about meetings, contacts, and image. He didn't notice how often I drifted into silence, or how I stopped sharing my thoughts with him. I was watching, listening, learning. The more he spoke, the clearer it became. This wasn't about a name. It was about control. About whose identity mattered more. About whose sacrifices were invisible. About whose comfort was expected, and whose was optional. One evening, we attended a small networking dinner with his colleagues. As he introduced himself, he emphasized his old last name with pride. I stood beside him, smiling politely. When someone asked, "And your wife?" Samir hesitated, just for a second. Then he said, "This is her." No name, no title, no acknowledgement. I felt something detach inside me. I didn't correct him. I didn't smile wider. I simply nodded. That night, as I removed my earrings in front of the mirror, I barely recognized the woman staring back at me. She looked composed, but her eyes were tired. I thought about all the ways I had adjusted myself for this marriage, softened my opinions, delayed my dreams, accepted small humiliations in the name of peace. I had told myself that love required compromise, but I was starting to see the difference between compromise and erasure. The next day, I visited my parents. My mother noticed immediately. "What's wrong?" she asked gently. I tried to brush it off. "Nothing."
She didn't buy it.
After some silence, I told her everything. The dinner, the announcement, the paperwork, the way he dismissed my feelings. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she said something that settled deep in my chest. "A man who is ashamed of your name will eventually be ashamed of your voice." I didn't respond, but I felt the truth of it. That night, back home, I sat across from Samir at the dining table. "I need to ask you something," I said calmly. He looked up from his phone. "Sure. If I told you I wanted to change my last name again, not yours, not mine, just something neutral, would you support it?" He frowned. "Why would you do that?" "To feel like myself." He scoffed lightly. "That's ridiculous. A last name isn't something you play with." I stared at him. "Interesting." "What?" he asked. "It's serious when it's yours," I said softly, "but embarrassing when it's mine."
His jaw tightened.
"You're twisting my words." "No," I replied. "I'm finally hearing them clearly." He stood up, annoyed. "I don't have time for this." He walked away. And in that moment I knew, if I stayed silent, I would disappear entirely. So I didn't raise my voice. I didn't beg. I didn't plead. Instead, I began to prepare.
Quietly.
I gathered documents. I updated my resume. I reopened an old savings account. Not because I planned to leave immediately, but because I planned to never be powerless again. Samir noticed the change, eventually. "You've been distant," he said one night. I met his eyes. "I've been paying attention." He laughed it off. "You're overreacting." But I wasn't. I was waking up. Because love that requires you to erase yourself isn't love. And the moment he rejected my name in front of everyone, that was the moment I stopped assuming he would protect my dignity. I didn't plan the conversation. It arrived on an ordinary evening, the kind where the house felt too quiet and the walls seemed to listen. Samir came home later than usual, loosening his tie as he walked in. He looked tired but satisfied, like someone whose day had gone exactly as planned. Mine hadn't. I was sitting at the dining table with a single folder in front of me. He paused when he saw it. "What's that?" he asked. "Paperwork." I replied evenly. His eyes narrowed slightly. "For what?" "For clarity." He scoffed, dropping his keys into the bowl. "You've been dramatic lately." I gestured to the chair across from me. "Sit." Something in my tone made him hesitate, but he sat. I opened the folder slowly, deliberately. Inside were copies of documents, bank statements, certificates, our marriage license. He glanced at them, confused. "Why are you showing me this?" "Because," I said, meeting his gaze, "you made a decision about our marriage without me. And I want to be clear about what that means." He leaned back. "I told you, it's just a name." "No," I replied quietly. "It's respect." He rolled his eyes. "Here we go again." "I'm not finished," I said calmly. That made him stop. "When you rejected my name in front of your family," I continued, "you didn't just embarrass me. You told me, and everyone else, that my identity was something you needed to fix." "That's not what I meant." "It doesn't matter what you meant," I said. "It matters what you did." He frowned. "So what? You want an apology?" I shook my head. "I want acknowledgement." Silence settled between us. I slid one document toward him. "What's this?" he asked. "My savings account," I said. "The one I reopened last month." His eyes snapped up. "Why?" "Because I realized something," I said evenly. "I've been depending on you to define my worth. And that ends now." His expression shifted, from annoyance to discomfort. "You're overthinking." "I'm thinking clearly," I interrupted. "For the first time in a long time." I took a steady breath. "I didn't marry you to become an accessory, or a liability, or a name you outgrow." He leaned forward. "Are you threatening to leave me?" "No," I said honestly. "I'm telling you what will happen if nothing changes." His jaw clenched. This is ridiculous. I met his eyes. Then why does it scare you? That question landed harder than I expected. He stood up abruptly. You're blowing this out of proportion. I remained seated.
Calm.
Grounded. No, I said. You underestimated me. The room felt heavier now, charged with something unfamiliar. I'm not asking you to keep my name, I continued. I'm asking you to stop treating it like something beneath you. He looked away. And if you can't do that, I added quietly, then we need to talk about what this marriage actually means to you. He laughed, but there was no humor in it. You're really willing to make such a big deal over something so small? I stood then. It's only small when it isn't yours. The silence that followed was deafening. Samir stared at me, really looked at me for the first time in weeks.
And I saw it then.
Not anger, not confidence.
Fear.
Because he was starting to realize something he hadn't expected. I wasn't shrinking anymore. And he didn't know how to handle that. The next few days were tense in a way I had never experienced before.
Samir didn't argue with me.
He didn't apologize either. Instead, he went quiet, the cold, distant quiet of someone who feels challenged but refuses to admit it. He stayed longer at work. He answered questions with shrugs. He avoided conversations that required accountability. And I let him, because I had learned something important. Silence can be a choice, not a weakness. One evening, his mother called. I could hear her voice through the phone as he spoke to her in the living room. Yes, Sammy? I know. No, it's not that serious. I closed my eyes. Later, he approached me cautiously. My mother thinks you're upset because you feel insecure. I looked at him steadily. Is that what you think too? He hesitated. I think you're taking things too emotionally. I smiled, not with warmth, but clarity. That's what you say when you don't want to take responsibility. His expression hardened. You're changing. Yes, I said. And that scares you. He didn't deny it. The real shift came the following weekend at a family gathering, smaller than the last, but no less significant. Samir introduced himself using his old last name again. Loudly, confidently. Then he paused. And this is my wife, he said. No name. Again. Something inside me settled. I waited until we were alone in the car. I noticed you didn't say my name, I said calmly.
He sighed.
You're being sensitive. No, I replied. I'm being observant. He snapped. Why do you need validation all the time? I turned to him. Why do you need to erase me to feel important? That shut him up. At home, the tension finally cracked. I can't keep apologizing for who I am, he said angrily. I never asked you to, I replied. I asked you to stop being ashamed of who I married. The words hung between us. He ran a hand through his hair. I didn't think you'd make this into such a big issue. And I didn't think the man I married would humiliate me in front of his family, I said quietly. His shoulders dropped. For the first time, he looked tired. Not angry. Not defensive. Just exposed. What do you want from me? He asked. I took a deep breath. I want a partner who stands beside me, not above me. I want my name spoken with the same respect as yours. And I want to know that if someone laughs at my identity, you'll shut it down, not join in. He looked at the floor. That's a lot, he muttered. It's the bare minimum, I replied. Silence filled the room again. But this time, it wasn't heavy. It was decisive. I knew then that whatever happened next, I would be okay. Because I had already reclaimed something important. My dignity. We didn't talk for 2 days after that. Not because we had nothing left to say, but because everything that needed to be said had already been spoken. Samir slept on the couch. I stayed in the bedroom. The silence between us wasn't hostile anymore. It was reflective. On the third morning, I woke up before sunrise. I stood by the window, watching the city stretch awake, and thought about all the versions of myself I had been before marriage. Confident, hopeful, whole. I hadn't lost her. I had just buried her under compromise. When Samir finally knocked on the bedroom door, I didn't flinch. Can we talk? He asked quietly. I nodded. He sat across from me, not towering, not defensive, just human. I spoke to the lawyer, he said slowly. I told him to pause the paperwork. I waited. I didn't realize how deeply I hurt you, he continued. I thought I was making a practical choice. But I see now. I made it without you. I studied his face. And
I asked.
and I was wrong. The word landed gently, but firmly. I don't want to be married to someone who feels erased, he said. And I don't want to be the man who does the erasing. My chest tightened. I'm not asking you to keep my name, I said softly. I'm asking you to respect it. He nodded. I do. I will. He hesitated, then added, and if anyone ever disrespects it again, I'll correct them. Immediately. I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding, but something had changed inside me too. I need you to understand something, I said. Even if you had apologized yesterday, I would still need time. Because this wasn't just one moment. It was a pattern. I know, he said, and I'm willing to unlearn it. We sat in silence for a moment, not uncomfortable, just honest. Later that day, we attended a small dinner with friends. As we were introduced, Samir spoke clearly. This is my wife, he said, smiling. With her full name. He said it without hesitation, without embarrassment, without apology. The sound of my name, spoken with pride, felt different now. Not because he said it, but because I no longer needed him to. I had reclaimed it myself. That night, as we walked home, I realized something important.
I didn't stay because he changed.
I stayed because I knew I could leave and still be whole. My name hadn't lost its power. I had just forgotten it carried my strength, and I would never forget that again.